I've always been cautious about online dating, but when I met Ryan through a dating app, he seemed like a genuine guy. We chatted for a few weeks, video called several times, and he told me all the right things. I was eager to meet him in person. We decided to meet at a cafe in the city center. When Ryan arrived, he was different from his online profile. He was unkempt, his eyes were bloodshot, and he seemed nervous. I tried to dismiss it as first date jitters, but something felt off. During our date, Ryan became increasingly possessive. He insisted on holding my hand constantly, and when I politely told him I needed some space, he snapped. His demeanor changed in an instant. He leaned in too close, his breath sour with alcohol. "You're mine," he whispered, "forever mine." Fear coursed through me. I tried to break free, but he tightened his grip. People around us were watching, but no one intervened. In that moment, I realized I was in danger. I managed to pull away abruptly and stumbled outside the cafe. Ryan followed closely, his voice echoing through the street. I ran frantically, but he was faster. I heard his heavy footsteps pounding after me. Just as he was about to catch up, I darted into a crowded mall. I lost sight of him amidst the throngs of people. But the fear lingered. I spent hours wandering the mall, too terrified to go outside. When it got dark, I finally emerged. Ryan was nowhere to be seen, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still lurking somewhere nearby. I hailed a cab and headed home, my heart pounding with disbelief. I called the police and reported the incident. They brushed it off as a misunderstanding, but I knew better. Ryan's behavior was far beyond normal. He was a predator, a delusional stalker who believed I belonged to him. In the days that followed, I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I started therapy and took self-defense classes. The fear never truly left me. I knew that Ryan was still out there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. One evening, I noticed someone watching me from across the street. It was him. Panic surged through me as I ran until I collapsed on my neighbor's doorstep. He called the police and Ryan was finally arrested. The trial was brief. They convicted him of stalking and harassment. He spent a short time in jail before disappearing once again. I have not seen him since, but the fear and uncertainty remain. I learned the hard way that even in the world of online dating, there are serious dangers lurking. I am more cautious now, and I never take anyone I meet online at face value. Because that terrifying night, I faced a stalker who truly believed I was his property, his possession. And I'll never forget the fear of that close call, where I escaped by mere seconds. It all started after I joined an online dating site. I wasn't really into it, but my friends had convinced me. My job was taking most of my time and energy, but I had a normal, simple wish. I wanted to meet someone. After a couple months of exchanging the usual meaningless chats and going out on a couple of boring dates, I met Brian. Brian was charming, funny, and handsome. His profile had just the right amount of photos. Not too many to seem like he was trying too hard, but enough to show he wasn't hiding anything. He had a great sense of humor, knew just how to make me laugh, and seemed to be very interested in me. How could it get any better? It was the first time in a long while that someone had actually caught my attention and made me want to go out with him again. On our first date, we went to this nice Italian restaurant. It was the first date where I actually had a nice conversation with someone. We talked for hours, laughing and getting to know each other. I was surprised at how easy it was to talk to him. He was so open and honest. For once, it felt like I wasn't on a blind date with a stranger, but with someone I had known all my life. We started seeing each other more and more. Brian was everything I had ever wanted in a boyfriend. He was kind, caring, and always knew how to make me smile. Everything was going wonderfully well. I couldn't imagine how things could get any better. Then things started getting weird. I'm not sure when it started, but there were times when Brian would seem distracted and distant. He would get this weird look in his eyes, like he was hiding something. He also started asking me a lot of personal questions, things I didn't feel comfortable sharing with anyone. He asked stuff like, "Where do you keep your extra money? Do you normally carry pepper spray or anything that could protect you? What's your boss like? Is it possible to steal something and not get caught?" I thought he was just being nosy and trying to make conversation, but as time went on, I started to feel uncomfortable. One night, I was getting ready to go to a work event when Brian called to check up on me. I was running late and wanted to get ready, so I just lied to him. I told him that I had already left when I was actually still getting ready. I was dressed and ready to go when I received a text from him that immediately chilled me to the bone. "What are you wearing right now?" How did he know that I was not out already? How did he know what I was wearing? I thought he was joking at first, but he sent me another text asking me again. "What are you wearing?" "It's the red dress, isn't it?" I was frozen. How did he know I was wearing a red dress if I had just gotten ready? He didn't know where I was, so he couldn't be outside. I grabbed my phone and ran out of my apartment. I headed to the event unsure of what to think. Was he playing some kind of sick joke? How did he know that I was home, getting ready for the event? As soon as I got there, I couldn't stop glancing behind me, paranoid that Brian might be hiding somewhere around the corner, waiting for me. For some reason, I started to feel like getting stalked. My heart was racing. I felt that my face had turned pale and I couldn't focus on what was happening around me. I just sat at a corner and spent the whole event waiting to leave. When the event ended, I rushed to my car, but then I froze. There was a man, pale with long, dark, dirty hair, standing beside my driver's side door. I thought he looked familiar and I felt my body getting colder by the second. The stranger just stood there, looking at me, before starting to slowly walk towards me. Before realizing what was going on, I took out the keys and pressed the button to unlock the car. I got inside, locked the doors, rolled the window down and shouted at him. "Leave me alone." He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me. "What do you want?" I shouted, terrified. "Get away from me." I glanced at the rear mirror and noticed that he was still standing there, watching me. His eyes were cold and lifeless, like the eyes of a predator targeting its prey. I quickly rolled up the window, put the car in drive, and sped away. My heart was beating so fast that I could barely think. I drove home, but as soon as I stepped out of the car, I looked back and saw that he was standing across the street, still looking at me. I ran to my apartment and called the police. He had simply disappeared into the night by the time they arrived. He seemingly knew a lot about me despite having never met me before. I tried to shake the feeling that, if it weren't for me being quick, he would have approached me, and then who knows what might have happened. As soon as they left, I blocked Brian and deleted his number. I didn't know if it was him or not, but I didn't want to take any chances. I never found out who that stranger was, but I had a feeling that I would never forget him and the sheer terror he instilled in me. I never went on another online dating site after that. I'm not sure if Brian was behind it or not, but I know that I don't want to risk finding out. I thought that I was having a good time. I had met this guy Jack through an online dating app, and he seemed pretty nice. We had been texting for a while, and he had asked me out on a date to the park. I was nervous, but excited at the prospect of meeting him in person. The park was crowded, and it was a warm, sunny day. I saw Jack at the entrance, and he was just as cute as his pictures. He was a bit taller than me, with curly brown hair and blue eyes. He was wearing a casual outfit with jeans and a polo shirt. We walked around the park, and I started to warm up to him. He was really funny, and we had a lot in common. We talked about our jobs, our families, and our hobbies. He told me that he loved hiking and that he had climbed several mountains. I told him about my love for dogs and about my pet golden retriever. However, as the date continued, I started to notice some minor, yet nagging inconsistencies and oddities in his behavior. He stuttered subtly several times, and he paused every now and then as if he wanted to remember to say something planned. I started to become a bit uneasy. I wondered if everything was really as he said, or if there was something more to him I didn't know. My initial positive impression of him started to wane. As the sun started to set, we decided to head back. I walked with him to his car, and he offered to drive me home. Initially, I hesitated, but ultimately I didn't want to be rude. As we walked towards his car, I noticed that he was walking very close behind me, almost as if he was trying to intimidate me. I decided to speed up my pace slightly, but he matched my pace and stayed just behind me. I felt an incredibly strong chill running down my spine. We got in his car, but my instincts told me that I was in a very dangerous situation. I was no longer sure I could trust him. I realized that I had made a terrible mistake and that I should not have gotten in the car with him. Once he stopped at a red light, I suddenly got out the car and broke into a run, desperate to escape his clutches and to evade the menace I felt from this seemingly friendly man. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. That tall, lanky figure immediately followed suit and was fast on my heels. I looked everywhere for help, but the park was deserted, and no one was around. The loud pounding sound of his steps was getting incredibly close. I spotted a group of people standing in front of a cafe, and I changed direction and ran towards them. I felt a deep, sharp pain on my left wrist, and I fell forward. I saw that he had grabbed me and was pulling me backwards. Desperation coursed through my entire being as he was getting closer to his objective, and I was losing strength. I started screaming as loud as I could and kicking with my legs and moving my arms as wildly as I could, but he was incredibly strong and he was not letting go. The people from the cafe looked at our direction and some of them started running towards us. Sensing that he was losing his grip on the fight, my stalker immediately let go of my wrist and disappeared into the night. I was completely breathless and in shock, but I had managed to escape what seemed to be a certain terrible fate. I called my friend immediately, who picked me up from that place and took me home. I was terrified and shaken. I had never been more afraid in my entire life. Eventually, I regained some composure and I called the police. I reported the incident, though I didn't have much hope that they would catch my assailant. Several months later, I was browsing through the local newspaper when I saw a story about a man who had been arrested for stalking and attempted kidnapping. The description matched the man I had met at the park, and I was certain that it was him. I called the police, and they confirmed that it was the same man. I was relieved that he had been caught, but I was also shaken to think about what could have happened if I had not escaped. I realized that I had been incredibly lucky and that I should never have met him in person. I deleted my online dating profile that same day, and I never used it again.